a dreamer, but my heart's of gold. I had to run away high, so I wouldn't come home low. Just when things went right, it doesn't mean they were always wrong. Just take this song, and you'll never be left all alone. Take me to your heart, feel me in your bones. Just one more night, and I'm coming on this long and winding road. I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home. Tonight, I'm on my way, I'm on my way, home sweet home.
Okay, hi everybody. We're back. It's the Dystopian Book Club.
Finally.
The one version of our podcast that people actually listen to and look forward to and ask us what happened to us. There was a thank you for those of you who have expressed concern. It's been about what, like 8 or 9 months since
Was the
since
last one
time.
we did Mark Bolan? I think it
Yeah,
was.
so the last podcast we did was Mark Bolan, and then the last time we've done anything as a unit was when we watched Kiss Meets the Fan in October. And so we thought about earlier this year, we thought about doing like a this is what we've been doing episode, but we couldn't really get our shit together. And it's also, I feel like we end up doing this every year basically.
It's basically like we have seasons.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Accidentally.
Yeah, just totally through no planning, but obviously the holidays are busy. The early this year was a really busy time for me.
Right. I was gonna say, in our defense, it's not just that we couldn't get our shit together; it's that this is the lowest priority of our shit.
Yeah, right.
I've been like insanely busy for the last, like, basically since Christmas. I've been busy. So.
And between the two of us, I feel like one or the other has been sick for the last 3 months.
Oh yeah, so. I was sick for the first 3 weeks of January. So.
Yeah. So now we're both healthy and reasonably prepared, and we're back to talk about the dirt. I think I also need to thank a couple people for this, because we've been reading trashy rock biographies for, gosh, when did we start? Was that
the first one? The first one was Gene Simmons.
Was that November 20?
Shit, it was September of 20. Something.
Was it 2016?
When we read it, it was in September, and it was it was before I was working at Amazon, so that might have been 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is easily I could easily look this up.
Nope. Let's just keep deliberating.
But the point is, we started with Kiss along like 2 or 3 years ago. And we've been slowly, we read all 4 Kiss biographies. We read, obviously, Crazy from the Heat, David Lee Roth. We've been
classic.
Yeah, exactly. We've been getting more and more kind of regular with these because, like I said, we recognize that this is the one thing that we've done that has kind of connected with people. So, and
also, I love doing it. Like, my favorite things to read are about stupid rock stars. Like, I have like a whole my bookcase is literally devoted to like art, and then above that I have music, and at least half of it is just shitty rock. And
there's really no such. I shouldn't say that. I'm sure there are very good books about music and rock music, and I've read some of them, and we've even kind of we've gone off the trashy stuff a little bit, like with Mark Bolan's book, the last one. That was like a legit book.
Yeah. But he was a trashy person, so.
Exactly. And I think rock and roll in general just doesn't tend to make for very, intellectual, edifying discussion. So the point is, we've been doing this for a while. And somebody on our YouTube channel was like, "Hey, you guys need to do, the dirt." And I was like, "Well, fuck! Like, I don't know why we'd never thought of this before because Mötley Crüe's The Dirt is like the gold standard of trashy rock biographies. It is both the trashiest and also I would say one of the best that we've read.
It actually is really well written.
Yeah. It arguably more well written than Mötley Crüe deserves.
Right.
but yeah, they got a real author. Neil Strauss he was an actual journalist. I feel like he was kind of like best known for Mystery is his fault. The reason why we know about the dating the pickup artist is probably his fault because he did a profile on. So he guy has a niche, like I feel.
What is it? The little goatee, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Mystery kind of looks a little bit like Mick Mars or like a cross.
Doesn't Mick Mars look like Nikki Sixx? Hold on, let me look up.
Wait, you mean Mystery? Yeah, I guess he looks more like Nick. Well, he looks like Nikki Sixx, but wearing Mick Mars's hat. I think is.
Yeah, he looks like if you took Nikki Sixx's face and like squashed it onto a smaller face, and then put him in Jamiroquai's hat.
Yeah. So that's
he also kind of looks a little bit like Pauly Shore too.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that. What a weird, this all kind of ties back to the same time. Like what a weird time for popular culture. You had the pickup artists. This was like, early to mid 2000s. You had the pickup artists, you had the dirt, you had Mötley Crüe was on fucking VH1 nonstop. Like I didn't think about this until we started looking stuff up on YouTube, but VH1 was like the Mötley Crüe channel for a solid 5 years.
That's what I was thinking, because whenever I read books, I always kind of like get on YouTube and get like inundated in that band. Like I did that with David Lee Roth, and I was just constantly watching David Lee Roth videos. I did that with Mötley Crüe, and there is so much, like so many documentaries. There are like 4 or 5 documentaries, and then and even before VH1, like MTV, because they came out around the time that MTV was showing metal constantly. Mm-hmm. So there's like stuff about the Headbangers Ball and like a ton of Mötley Crüe videos, and then a ton of Mötley Crüe documentaries. Like there's just like a ton of like the Mötley Crüe archive is insanely large. There's too much for it's again like too much for what this band deserves, honestly.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's honestly probably why it never occurred to us. Like we're both red-blooded Americans. Obviously we like Mötley Crüe. But they're not really in my other than I'm somebody that mostly just listened to the hits. I obviously know Kickstart My Heart and Girls, Girls, Girls and Shout at the Devil. And, I know Mötley Crüe, but they're not a band that I've ever really dove into. And having done that after reading The Dirt, I have to say I'm still I'm still not really won over. but they had some good songs. And I think more importantly, they were just like depraved, debauched idiots. And this is kind of like, this is the ultimate rock biography because it has no shame. They're not trying to make themselves look good. They're not, they're really, I don't know who got them to agree to be this frank and this like unguarded, but, man, it's amazing. Like like you can open the book to a random page and there is an anecdote in there that is worthy of being legendary,
at least compared to you, I would consider myself a Mötley Crüe fan just because I was like a dumb metalhead in high school, especially. So like I'd listen to like I was really into like LA metal, basically.
Yeah.
Like that whole like I really loved Wasp and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I listened to like the Shout at the Devil album. This actually, reading this got me more into their catalog. I still haven't listened to Generation Swine and shit like that because I don't care.
Yeah,
I've heard enough.
Or the album that Vince Neil isn't on. I'm like, I mean, I'm kind of curious. I'm curious about hearing that, but I mean,
I don't give a shit. Yeah, like I pretty much, I don't think I've listened, other than Shout at the Devil, I don't think I've listened to a full album just because I get bored. So mainly like a greatest hits album is pretty much all you need from Mötley Crüe, and maybe their first two albums.
Right.
But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, other than to say that I actually like, I have liked Mötley Crüe for a while, but I'm not, I don't like, I don't know how you can it's kind of like with Kiss, honestly. Like it's the same kind of thing where they maybe had like one or two really talented members, but the rest were not that talented, and it's just like fascinating to me how far they went with their very limited skill.
Right. Yeah, they're one of the they're one of the best selling bands of all time. I don't know where they are in the ranking, but I know that they're in the ranking, which is like pretty crazy.
Yeah, especially considering that there is not one album by them that I like every song on.
Yeah.
Like usually when a group when I consider a group to be that good, at least like one album is like, this is a good album.
Yeah, this is like a classic. Right.
Yeah. Which I guess I feel that way about their first album. That Too Fast for Love is a really good album with a really good album cover. Like, I like everything about it. But even that, there's some songs on there that are definitely skippable to me.
Yeah. So anyway, we're making amends by coming back, and I'm glad we did it. And so thank you. Bruce Gaskins on YouTube, I think, was the first guy to say please review Mötley Crüe, The Dirt next, and then Tony Bernardo also told us to do that. And so I can only assume that if two people told us to do it, that there were hundreds of people who wanted us to do it, but didn't.
Also,
didn't
when did they ask
loud.
us to do it? Because we definitely didn't listen to them, and we did two other things that no one asked for.
Yeah, this was This was about 6 months ago. So, but you know,
yeah, we'll do it after two things no one asked for, and then a long break.
Right.
Stay tuned.
That's basically how we operate. So I guess a word about the structure of The Dirt. I think one thing that occurred to me is I keep thinking back to this tweet that I saw a long time ago that said it was from somebody else who read every Kiss biography, and he said it was the dumbest possible version of Rashomon. And that I was just like, he was able to just so succinctly nail these books that I was like, we talked about them for 8 hours when we could have just come up with just one little barb like that, you know? But I kept thinking about that description when I read The Dirt, because this really is the dumb, like it's, I don't know if it's dumber than Kiss's story, but it is more like Rashomon, because it's one book, alternating chapters written, or, you know, like obviously Vince Neil didn't sit down with a fucking typewriter and write his told to Neil Strauss, and then he kind of puts these chapters in conversation with each other, and every once in a while you get some comedy comes out of that because for example, the first time Nikki Sixx and Mick Mars meet each other, the same story is told from the same perspective, two ways. Mick Mars goes into a liquor store and meets Nikki Sixx, who's working at the liquor store at this time. He says his name was Frank. He played bass and he seemed like an all right guy. But then he said he listened to Aerosmith and Kiss, and I can't stand Kiss. I never fucking liked them. I instantly crossed him off my list of possible people to play with. I was into good music like Jeff Beck and the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. And then, the next chapter is Nikki, and he tells the story. He tells the story from the same perspective, and he says, "What are you into?" I asked. "The Paul Butterfield Blues Band and Jeff Beck," he answered. "What about you?" I was disappointed that this hunchback, who looked so demented, had such lame, predictable taste. I rattled off the list of the cool music I was into: The Dolls, Aerosmith, MC5, Nugent, Kiss, and he just looked at me contemptuously. "Oh," he said dryly, "I'm into real players." "Fuck you, man," I shot back, pompous little shit. "No, fuck you," he said, not angrily but firmly and confidently, as if I would soon see the error of my ways. "Get out of my store, asshole." I pretended like I was going to leap over the counter and kick his Jeff Beck loving ass. So, you see like that was the first example, but there's definitely a few other examples of like one person tells the story one way and another member tells the story often in a completely, wildly different way. It just made me wish that Kiss had been getting along well enough that they would have done this for their book instead of us having to do all the work to stitch together.
However, I also kind of love that they basically, we make every fucking podcast about Kiss, but
right.
I kind of love that they did with their books basically what they did with the solo albums and like separated them when they could have easily been one album.
It is on brand. Yeah, it is on brand for them. And then also I just love the mental picture of them reading each other's books and getting mad and writing their own book to respond to the last book and then that just happening, 4 times.
Right.
So anyway, but this is this was a format that I enjoyed. And then there are even a few times, a few of the chapters are written, not by members of the band at all. There's a chapter by Doc McGee, who was their manager for a while. A couple other like record company people. John Calabi, was that his name? The guy who replaced Vince Neil.
Yeah.
For a while. John Calabi gets a couple of chapters to tell that story. So you're kind of seeing this from all angles. It's a little bit like it's like a documentary in book form, and that was enjoyable to read. And it's also like, the chapters are nice and short, so you don't have to. You're not really slogging through. Because this is the subject matter is definitely you kind of need that change of viewpoint. Because otherwise like with any rock biography, it's like, it can get kind of numbing after a while. It's like, oh, especially when they get to the hotel room destruction, the inevitable hotel room destruction chapters. It's like, oh my God, like, who cares?
However, I will say that like compared to like the last book I read with hotel room destruction was David Lee Roth, and that was like a whole fucking novel. His was like
it was like a dry textbook about destroying hotel rooms.
Right. So at least it was so short compared to that I was like, this is a fucking cakewalk compared to having to read like 10 chapters worth of David Lee Roth claiming that hotel destruction is like art, basically, for page after page after page.
Yeah, that is and you really see the personalities of the band members come out. I'm again like not a hardcore Mötley Crüe fan, but like I feel like I know them after reading this. They all kind of fit into their archetypes. My favorite, I have to say, coming out of this, I definitely identified the most with Mick Mars because
probably same.
He was older than everybody else. His back hurt all the time. Like I have scoliosis, so I don't have as severe a condition as Mick Mars actually has like a serious ailment. I don't have a condition as serious, but I can relate to just being like angry and my back hurting constantly and be just like surrounded by these fucking morons, And then he'll also just go off on tangents about like the dinosaurs and about like aliens. Yeah, he just like he has these bizarre theories. He reminds me a little bit, like, again, not to make this about Kiss, but he's kind of like the Ace Frehley archetype, where he's like,
right, he's the only talented member of the
exactly
group.
He can actually play his instrument. He's sort of aloof from everybody else. He's a fucking space cadet, and everybody else kind of hates him also. Like, there's kind of a contentious relationship with the rest of the band. The metaphor sort of falls apart because like, obviously with Kiss, their essential problem was that half of the band were like, fucking moron party animals, and the other half of the band were like school marms, and they tried, that was like an unsustainable conflict. With Mötley Crüe, it's like even the most kind of straight edge member, Mick Mars, is still drunk, and everybody else is just like insane. Like
one of the first notes I wrote actually was, so far I identify with Mick Mars the most, especially the last couple of sentences of chapter 2, page 7. And I just went to chapter 2, page 7, and it's this is where they dropped us off. He's talking about aliens. This is where they dropped us off. We're the insane fucking people from somewhere else. Just a bunch of trash. My back hurts. And that's the end of the chapter. I was like, that's me. I've actually probably said something similar to that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, on the opposite of the spectrum, we have, of course, Tommy Lee, who is like a real life Ted from Bill and Ted, basically, is how I kind of picture him. His first chapter, he doesn't show up until part 3 of the book on page 43, and his chapter starts, "Dude, fuck yeah, finally. How much room is Nikki going to get, bro? Fuck."
I think that Tommy and Vince's chapters were my favorites, honestly.
Yeah, they're like,
especially Vince's.
Those are the two like California. They're Bill and Ted. Like, they're a little less like sweet than Bill and Ted. But yeah, they're definitely like the California-born members, and it's like painfully obvious. They're just like surfer dudes. Neither of them are the brightest tool in the box. But yeah, I have to agree about Vince. Well, I think Mick Mars is sort of the member of the band that I identify with the most. Vince's chapters, like, you could make a whole movie out of almost any one of Vince's chapters. Like,
there was that one I was reading, and we'll get to it, but it was like an entire film in one chapter, and it wasn't even that long.
Yeah.
But so much shit happened in it.
I know.
It was like 1 minute he's punching someone like he does in every chapter, and then the next he's like cavorting around the town with Rob Lowe.
Yeah.
And then the next moment he's like fucking Pauly Shore's girlfriend. I think
Gary Busey and Kelsey Grammer show up.
He like throws up on them. It's a lot. It's a lot going on in this book.
Yeah, I ran out of flags. I would flag something that was important, and then when I ran out, I was I was going back and looking for trying to reuse some of the flags, and I would look at a page and I would be like, well, this isn't that interesting. Like, this is just, this is just talking about Tommy Lee's girlfriend who, when she orgasmed, would squirt across the room and made his van stink. Like, how is that worthy of a flag? Like, this is one of the most boring parts of the book, So it's kind of you start out and you're like, oh my God, everything in this book is amazing, and then by the end you're like, yeah. Like, oh, they're in jail again. Like, who cares? One thing that set it apart from the Crazy from the Heats of the world is it is in relatively chronological, like, narrative order. It does sort of start.
What I love that's our new standard.
It's like, oh, this is actually arranged in a way that is meant to convey events happening in time. It's not just like David Lee Roth fished 200 pages of scraps out of his assless pants and just like threw them in the air, and they all just kind of floated down onto his editor's desk, and they put them in whatever order they fell down in. Right. It does kind of start. It does kind of start in media res with a chapter on when the band, or most of the band, were living together, and just like the squalor that they were living in. One thing that impressed me right off,
imposed squalor.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I know. They
were poor, but they also. I watched a documentary about basically hair metal in the 80s, and there was a short part about Mötley Crüe's house at the time. So this was before I read the dirt that I watched this documentary. And I guess they had this, like, wheel that they would put women on, and they, like, put this girl on there, and they, like, sodomized her with something. Like, maybe they just put a butt plug in her or something, and, like, she ended up shitting all over the room. So she was, like, spinning around and shitting everywhere. So
that, amazingly, either that wasn't in the book, or, like I said, there's so much in this book that I just found it unremarkable. Well, I was shitting all over the...
Right, I don't think I found it. This was the account of someone else, so I can't remember who it was.
Well, so maybe it wasn't...
It might have been someone from Rat, I can't remember.
Right, but... so maybe that was just like a totally normal day to them. They didn't even think that would be worthy of putting in their book. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I think it is important. They didn't have money. They were full-time rock musicians. But they did. Half of them were dating, like, actual rich women, so they had access to money. They had a manager who could have paid for, like, basic needs. So I think this is actually a good, way to kind of set the tone of the book, because every problem that the members of Mötley Crüe have throughout the book is because they're idiots. Like, that's the root cause of all of their of all of their problems, with like a few exceptions, like, Vince Neil's daughter gets cancer, and that's genuinely sad.
Yeah.
And that's not his fault. But every other thing that happens to Vince Neil is his fault. And so, yeah, it's like they're living in squalor. There's roaches all over the place. apparently human shit all over the place. But this is not like this is not like a story of abject poverty, because what it really is they're spending all of their money on like hairspray and like snakeskin boots.
which I mean, I understand, because I'm also an idiot who will go hungry and then buy some like leopard print heels.
Right. I was impressed by how apparently fastidious a record keeper Nikki Sixx was, because there are examples, especially in this early part of the book, there are examples of some of the documents that they talk about. Like this chapter on the Mötley House starts with an actual reproduction of the notice they got from the County of Los Angeles Department of Health Services, telling them to throw the gigantic pile of trash that they had created away, and somehow Nikki Sixx just like kept this, which seems out of character for a guy who, for the majority of the book is like barely conscious, like he, but he apparently kept really good, files. Like
there's also a 6th grade report card.
Yeah, exactly.
And a ton of pictures.
Yeah.
I feel like, but the thing about Nicky that I noticed too, and this kind of comes out in his chapters, is he's very like calculated about some things, I guess. Like I think he was really serious about being in a band.
Right.
Like at the expense of being interested in music, if that makes sense. Right. Like I think he just wanted to be the New York Dolls and didn't care how it happened and didn't bother learning to play his instrument at first in order to do it. Like it was more so about the look and finding people who could kind of like buoy you to that point.
Right. And he is super focused. It is like he's selective about where he decides to, because he's, as a human being, barely functioning, obviously, from the beginning of the book, and then it gets even worse and worse, and he gets, hooked on heroin, of course. But he definitely always is laser focused on the band, and that probably has a lot to do with why they stayed together for so long and why they were able to be as successful as they were, because he is like Nicky especially is extremely tenacious in a way that I can't imagine. I mean, like Vince and Tommy are not going to keep this band afloat,
Right, right. And not even Mick to a certain extent, because I feel like Mick Mars was just trying to find like a way to pay his bills, pretty much, and find a band that was like, so I think he wanted to be in a band. So he could
pay child support, I think.
Yeah, for what, his like 4 children.
Yeah.
But I feel like, well, and Mick Mars says this too, that like he would just leave to go to whatever worked the best. Like if it wasn't working, he would just leave.
Right.
So yeah, I think really Nicky was the glue holding them all together, because yeah, like they are, like there's a reason for the name Mötley Crüe. Like there are a ton of completely conflicting personalities.
Yeah.
Like Mick Mars doesn't even seem like he would be with them, honestly.
Right. Speaking of Mick Mars, there's not really one good place to say this, but I already read the quote where Nicky describes meeting him for the first time and calls him a hunchback. And I just started noticing the way that they would talk about Mick, which this is something that you and I, from watching VH1 back in the day, we have long held the opinion that Mick Mars is probably the ugliest man in rock and roll. And so after a while, I started just taking notes on the ways that they would describe him. So this is a more or less, I think, exhaustive list of what Mick Mars looks like. A creepy version of Johnny Thunders is how Nicky first describes him. Later on, he calls him a gnarly little leather Quasimodo. Tommy, when he meets him the first time, calls him a little troll with black hair down to his ass. and a flat broke, painfully shy, freaky looking relative of Cousin It. And then he gets really hung up on the Cousin It thing and calls him Cousin It for like the rest of the chapter. Vince says this is later when Mick is drinking a lot. So I don't know if this is a general burn on Mick or if it's specifically when he was drinking. But Vince says he looked like E.T. when he was sick.
Well, I'm looking at pictures of him now, and honestly, he looks more like E.T. when he was sick in this decade than I'm sure he did back then.
Now that he's sober, yeah.
Yeah. His disease has advanced, so I probably should not be making fun of him.
Right.
But,
yeah.
I mean, Vince said it first, so
yeah. Now that I know that he actually has a like a it's basically his spine is fusing together, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel slightly guilty about calling him the ugliest man in rock and roll, but
well, it's not his spine that's the problem.
Exactly. Doesn't explain the face. Mick Mars calls himself at one point, and this is specifically when he's drunk. He calls himself at one point a sweaty, disgusting pig. Nikki says again, these are like specific to when he's drinking. He said that Mick was drinking so much he was beginning to look like Meatloaf. Later on, Nikki says that
wait, that's a mean to Meatloaf. Meatloaf burn.
Later on, Nikki says he looks like someone had sewn his head. This is Mick's head onto the body of a Samoan wrestler, and then finally Nikki describes him as having
was he ever that fat?
I don't think so. At least not in the pictures. I mean, like. Vince was. Vince like,
Vince is.
Yeah. So I'm not sure why they're unloading on Mick. Although they do all. Nikki does. He definitely does have a few cracks about Vince's weight. Also, finally he says he has a puffy alcoholic face, which all things considered is pretty mild compared to everything else that I've said here. So those are that's a list of Mick Mars burns. If I missed one, if you're listening and I missed a good one, let me know, because that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the book.
Well, here's one. During the Shout at the Devil period, he really needed someone to tell him about blending his contour.
They all did.
This contour is not blended at all. It looks awful. It's just like a check mark on his face under his cheekbone. You gotta blend.
Yeah, they all did. This is actually let's
they all did.
let's talk about this because the Mötley Crüe, are well known for wearing makeup, and for the longest time, like I had heard probably on again, I spent my formative years watching VH1. This is probably like a pop-up video fact or something, but I'd heard that Aerosmith's Dude Looks Like a Lady was about Mötley Crüe, and for some reason in my head it was specifically Vince Neil from Mötley Crüe, and I just kind of like accepted that because I was like, well, yeah, he was always wearing like crazy. He looks like they looked like Victorian whores, like when you see like in a Jack the Ripper movie, where they have just a shit ton of rouge and like, crazy amounts of lipstick. They look like that, but deranged. So I always just kind of accepted that it was about Vince Neil wearing a lot of makeup, and I was like, well, that makes sense, but also, who is Steven Tyler to, be throwing stones in glass houses like this? I later discovered that actually it was inspired by Mötley Crüe, but it was inspired by Vince and Tommy saying dude all of the time. Which
I don't buy that. I don't buy it. I think it was what you thought.
It has to be both, right? Yeah, like...
I mean, it could be both, or it could be Steven Tyler needed a way to not get his ass beat by the members of Mötley Crüe.
He didn't want Vince Neil
right.
He saw how many punches Vince throws in this book, and was like, I don't want to be on the...
Okay, real quick, what's your favorite makeup look from Mötley Crüe? Because mine is like, it's a makeup and a whole look. So I like Vince's from Smoking in the Boys Room, where he has this stupid like powder pink like lip and like white eyeshadow. I might actually have to. I want to start a YouTube page and like recreate like hair metal looks and also like album covers with makeup. Now that I'm getting really into makeup, so I might try to recreate this. But okay, so he's got like the powder pink lipstick. He's got the white eyeshadow, a little pink like head band that is a scarf, so it goes down his head. His hair is all like feathered. He has no shirt and a little like what appears to be a necktie. So it's like a little rhinestone necktie that goes only just to his chest and comes around in a collar, and it looks like it's all like diamonds or rhinestones or something. And then like a Fred Flintstone vest. And then white gloves.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing. Best look ever. And then I love the video to that song because, first of all, I love that no one wanted to do that song. Everyone hated it except Vince.
Yeah.
Which I learned in the dirt. And I also love at the beginning of the video when he pops out of the beer and he's saying the whole spiel at the beginning of it. And his voice cracks me up so much when it like zooms in on him on his stupid makeup and he's like, but I found a way to get out of it. I love that part. Like that should be a meme. I fucking love it.
You ever seem to have those days when everyone's on your case, from your teacher all the way down to your best girlfriend? Well, you know, I used to have just about all the time, but I found a way to get out of it. Let me tell you about. I'm sitting in a classroom thinking it's a drag, listening to the teacher rap just in my bag. By the two bells ring, you know it's my cue. I'm gonna meet the boys on floor number 2, smoking in the boys' room, smoking in the boys' room. Now teacher, don't you feel that up with the rule, 'cause everybody knows that smoking is loud.
He does look. I'm looking at the video right now. He looks busted. Like he looks like he
the DMV who came into work after a walk of shame.
Yeah, it's like he put that makeup on last night, and his pillow, like half of it is on his pillow right now. Like, yeah, I definitely do think. I'm not as much a fan. You know, they make a big deal about their like shout at the devil look and how they were they were, you know, trying to set themselves apart from the other bands on the Sunset Strip by doing this whole like post-apocalyptic, you know, Mad Max Escape from New York thing. And I'm like, yeah, I guess that's kind of cool. But I agree with you. I think I like when they just went like straight up like busted hookers. Like Theater of Pain, girls. Especially Theater of Pain. I think they kind of butched it up a little bit for girls. They were like regular, you know, glam rock. But yeah, they were something else in like 85. And
I do actually genuinely like how they looked for their first album. Like Vince was like rail thin. They were all like rail thin and wearing like leather. That was actually a cool look. I thought they looked the most like the Dolls at that point, I feel like. But that's my favorite legitimate look. My favorite stupid look is Vince Neil Theater Pain era.
Yeah, but I feel like a lot of, I mean, I'm more of a, I know glam, you know, 70s glam rock better than 80s glam metal. So maybe Mötley Crüe were not an anomaly, but I feel like a lot of those guys just like, they got their girlfriends to do their makeup or something. And they like Mötley Crüe was like, no, we're going to do this ourselves. But then they didn't learn how to do it. Like they just like plastered as much makeup on their face as they possibly could. It's
man, you know, but now we have the luxury of YouTube makeup tutorials. They didn't have that.
That's true.
You just had to figure everything out yourself. Yeah. Nobody was telling them to blend.
Yeah. That's true, because you know, I like if you look at Prince in the mid '80s, he was wearing a foundation that did not match his natural color. So that is like, it was before YouTube. It was before Prince couldn't just go to the Sephora counter and have somebody.
It was before Fenty. Yeah, he probably didn't have a shade.
Exactly. So
we take so much for granted these days.
It's true. So yeah, talking about the first album, that kind of makes me think about one thing that's interesting. Mötley Crüe are like the glam metal band. Like they are the band that Poison and Rat and all those guys were aspiring to be. But you wouldn't necessarily know that from the individual members' influences, especially, obviously Mick Mars. Mick Mars wanted to be like this serious, like muso, blues Jeff Beck guitarist. That obviously did not happen. He spent the majority of his career making sounds like a motorcycle on his guitar. Like that's what happened to all of that training. And then Nikki Sixx, grew up like a punk rocker basically. And his biggest influences that he talks about are the New York Dolls. He talks about the MC5. Blue Cheer, who are not really punk, but were, kind of that like proto-punk, proto-metal. He talks about oddly the Sweet. Well, oddly, but not oddly, because you don't usually hear the Sweet get cited as an influence, but it makes absolute perfect sense for Mötley Crüe. And it actually, the whole time I was reading this book, I was like, why have they not covered Ballroom Blitz? Like instead of Smoking in the Boys Room or
right.
Yeah.
The reason they covered Smoking in the Boys Room, I found out from this book, is that they couldn't get their shit together to write any music. So Vince was like, let's just cover this group that my old band used to do. So that's why they did that. But man, like any Sweet song, honestly, would have been awesome for them to cover.
Yeah, and they have a similar, the Sweet were like, they weren't taken seriously at the time. They were kind of treated as a bubblegum band, and they kind of were. But they cast a pretty long shadow on this genre of music. Like, you can really clearly see where the Sweet's influence is on Mötley Crüe, from the Vince's high voice and just like the way that they'll combine these kind of really loud heavy guitars with very melodic pop kind of songwriting. Also Cheap Trick, like that's another band that you can really see.
Well, really a lot of the kind of like lower tier glam rock bands, like Slade, I guess Slade was at a certain point more famous in Britain than like T-Rex was. Right. So this may not be a fair thing to say, but like Slade is basically responsible for Quiet Riot's entire career. All of their music that's worth listening to is a fucking Slade cover.
Right. Yeah. So it is sort of like when I was first getting into especially glam, 70s glam, it would kind of annoy me that glam rock now means like Sunset Strip like fucking Camaro rock, like, but the connections are definitely there. Like it's actually a pretty maybe not with Bowie. Like I think there's definitely a sort of artfulness to the original glam movement that is not so much there with glam metal, but you can see there's definitely a lot of Slade there. There's definitely a lot of Sweet and even some Dolls too. Certainly visually. but I have a bone to pick with Nikki Sixx. Something he says early in the book here. He's talking about when he's trying to get a band together before Mötley Crüe. He says, I hated this first band that he was in. I hated them because they were into Rush and had lots of guitar pedals and talked about hammer-ons, and most egregious of all, had curly hair. If there's one...
Yeah! I remember that. I remember getting pissed off.
If there's one genetic trait that automatically disqualifies a man from being able to rock, it's curly hair. Nobody cool has curly hair. People like Richard Simmons, the guy from Greatest American Hero, and the singer from REO Speedwagon have curls. The only exceptions are Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople, whose hair is more tangled than curly, and Slash, but his hair is fuzzy, and that's cool. Okay, first of all,
First of all, Ian Hunter doesn't have tangled hair; it's curly.
That's super curly.
What hair looks like, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Like stop moving the goalposts. Like
right.
And it's also like earlier in almost that same chapter or the chapter before that, or somewhere. He was talking about having posters of the MC5 up. And so it's like, what MC5 posters did you have where you didn't see Wayne Kramer's big ass hair? Like all those guys, except for I think Fred Smith and Dennis Thompson had kind of like lanky, stoner hair. But Wayne and Rob Tyner had fucking like afros basically. Like, don't talk to me about curly haired people not being able to rock.
Right. I think it's funny that the more of these that we read, the more like the cast of character becomes so incestuous. Like the same people show up in every book. Like I was just talking about how the last couple of books we've read, Pauly Shore has made an appearance.
Yeah.
and David Lee Roth shows up in this one. He shows up like very early in this book on page 4.
Right. Oh my God. This was so, I loved this. I totally believe this because this story is like totally Dave. Did you have it? I
don't have it. I just remember that he was like cutting up coke and doesn't like a door fall on him and he just like keeps talking.
Yeah. It says we thought we were pretty suave because we had a mirrored door on our closet. This is Vince. Or we did. One night, David Lee Roth came over and was sitting on the floor with a big pile of blow, keeping it all to himself as usual. Again, like anybody who's read Crazy from the Heat can picture that. When the door fell off the hinges and cracked across the back of his head, Dave halted his monologue for a half second and then continued. He didn't seem to be aware that anything out of the ordinary had happened.
That's literally what reading Crazy from the Heat is like.
Yeah. And then he shows up again. Vince says that one of their first big fans was David Lee Roth. And he said, though we all knew it was not because he loved the music, but because he liked picking up the girls who came to see us. We were flattered. So yeah, David Lee Roth shows up. Who else? I mean,
well, we mentioned Pauly Shore.
Yeah,
he shows up multiple times.
Vince kills one of the guys from Hanoi Rocks. So not actually funny, but.
Yeah, but also funny. And what struck me about that too, like that was another tragic thing that happened. That was technically Vince Neil's fault, and he shouldn't have been drinking and driving. But also, like Jesus, like Ace Frehley's whole book was him drinking and driving.
Right. Yeah, like what rock star has not crashed a like a sports car while under the influence.
And it is like, I mean, you would expect more of them to kill people, but like, of course, I'm not like excusing that behavior, but I also think that's pretty fucked up that happened that way. Like, I don't particularly blame Vince just because all of his peers were drinking and driving too.
Right. Like, nothing about their they were living in this weird bubble. And again, it sounds like we're making excuses for them. One thing about this book is people are talking about it again because the movie is coming out. And I think probably the same day that we release this podcast will be the day that the movie version appears on Netflix. So, it's sort of, we're talking about the book, and a lot of people are kind of saying it's a little weird that Mötley Crüe is trying to put this story out again at a time when there's so much scrutiny on awful men's behavior. And there is there's some genuinely fucked up stuff in this book. Not just like, and as somebody who's been a fan of actual rock music, not fucking Morrissey and shit, but like actual, like
real music.
Exactly. Like
Kiss.
Led Zeppelin, Kiss, Black Sabbath, all those guys, they're fucking degenerates, and there's, and you do kind of have to at some point think like how do I condone or how do I make peace with their behavior? Because they behave like animals, I mean, especially with women. There's a scene early on where Nikki Sixx actually, even in 2001 when this book came out, this is pre Me Too, he was like, we basically raped this girl.
And it wasn't basically, they literally.
He actually, and he even says, like, that was kind of what surprised me, that he even said, like, she called and said, "Oh my God, Nikki, I was raped last night," and he's like, "Uh-oh," because he remembered. Basically, he was having sex with a girl in a closet. He pulled in Tommy to like switch places with him. And then possibly even pulled in another guy. It's like, it's fucked up, and that's probably, I think, the most extreme thing that happens in the book, at least in terms of, consent. But it is sort of, so it's like, this is something that we kind of have to wrestle with, especially when attitudes have changed. Like, first of all, this was not acceptable behavior in 2001 or 1981, and now it's like even less acceptable now. It's kind of something that you have to take into account. And yet I found myself, without making excuses for anyone, it's like the whole world that they lived in was insane and like not a way that anyone should live.
Well, it's kind of like, I was just re-listening to our Peter Criss podcast, and we were talking about how like there were a couple stories in there about how he was able to just like I can't remember what it was. It was like maybe the Playboy Mansion or something, but they were able to just pick whatever woman they wanted to. So after. Or no, it was Showgirls. So after their performance, they had to come up and like suck some rock star's dick,
right? Like,
because they were picked to do that. And even though that sounds like, oh yeah, that's what everyone is attaining to, like that's the kind of treatment everyone's attaining to get or whatever. It's still like a really weird, lonely existence,
right? And that's something that I feel like this book kind of brought out more than most, because it's, so it is like, I mean, when Nikki says like, oh shit, like we raped this girl, it wasn't so much like, oh my God, I need to re-examine, he doesn't change anything about about his lifestyle. For all we know, him and Tommy were like running trains on chicks like for the next 20 years, which
is fine as long as the woman consents.
Right.
Some bitches like gangbangs. It's fine.
It's like, it's not really the soul searching moment. It's more like, oh fuck, I'm going to get arrested.
Right. That's what I noticed, that no one gives a fuck about women in this book at all. Like, he's literally only even within his self-reflection of this,
right.
It's only that like, he only thinks about how he was able to get away with it,
right,
and being worried that he would get caught as a rapist.
Right. There's just like fleeting references to things like, when Nikki starts dating Lita Ford, he's like, wow, this is the first time I've ever actually respected a woman before. And it's like, well, man, that's kind of fucking sad, like that's not really like a lifestyle that sounds even appealing.
Right.
And I think that's kind of there's a lot of moments in this book that are like that, and just something about, you know, the kind of rock and roll lifestyle is one aspect. Celebrity is another aspect. The kind of, you know, the music business. It creates this environment where you're kind of encouraged to act out your lowest impulses, and you know, the idea is that, like, oh, we're having so much fun that, like, we've crossed over, you know, we're beyond morality now. But it's also like it's just not something that I've ever found, like, glamorous or appealing. Like, I've never wanted, you know, that's never a life that I've wanted for myself. It seems kind of not even in a moral sense. It just seems kind of horrible. You know, it like, in terms of even being, you know, happy.
Right. Well, it almost kind of reminds me of, in a way, but in, like, an opposite way, of being in high school again. And, like, when I was in like, you're supposed to do all this stupid shit you don't want to do. And so, like, me and my friends would be bored, and we would just fucking wreck stuff. Like,
Right.
that was our whole thing. Like going on tour and wrecking hotel rooms. Like, you're just bored and you're stuck in this cycle of bullshit. But that, like, being a rock star is like that, but elevated, and you get everything you want.
Right. And
but it's still, like, a kind of weird, like, it's a weird institution of its own.
Yeah. So it's like, no wonder that, you know, Vince Neil thought it was okay to drive while completely blitzed and end up killing someone. And, you know, like, take your pick from any of the other things that Vince Neil does throughout this book. It's like they're living in this whole bubble that allows and encourages them to act this way, and then punishes them when they take it too far. But, you know, like, where is the line when you're living it? I don't know. Like, it sounds like I'm making excuses for Mötley Crüe. I think it's more complicated than that, though. I think that basically this lifestyle is not a way that humans are meant to live, and you go fucking crazy. Like,
well, they kind of talk about that in the one chapter that's, like, the cogs of the machine of show business. It talks about that a little bit. Not necessarily about behavior, but that's kind of implied. It's more so, like, what it takes to get a hit record and things like that, and what happens when you have that hit record and how you maintain it. But it's still, like, the whole, like, rock music, like, machine, it kind of all goes hand in hand in a way.
Yeah, I thought that part was great, and it comes, you know, right after the band falls apart, basically. We'll go back to that a little bit. But they had this slow rise. Their first album comes out. They're basically stars in Los Angeles. Second album comes out, Shout at the Devil. They get, you know, nationwide exposure, start getting a little bigger. Next album's a little bigger than that. Next album's a little bigger than that. Dr. Feelgood, they blow up. They're like this, you know, huge multi-platinum band. And then they, you know, self-destruct because they can't, you know, they can't keep it together. And so they describe this in terms of this, like, system of cogs. Well, it starts with a conveyor belt of people, you know, trying to get their first hit. If they're lucky, they jump onto the first cog. According to the band, they said the first album missed the first cog. Shout at the Devil made it to the first cog. And you know, at any point in any of these cogs, you can be crushed. And the way they describe it is you're crushed and you either fall back to the platform and start over from the beginning, or you just fall into an abyss. Like, it's very grim. It says there's no way to get off the machine without dying. So basically, you know, it's this very bleak view of, I mean, they're talking from the perspective of a rock star, but it could be like any kind of any kind of public figure, any kind of artist, that relies on a certain level of success to make a living for themselves. It's like you're on this machine. You have to do everything you can to stay on it. You're constantly scrambling. You can fall off or get crushed at any time. And the only way off is when you die. I just thought that this was I've never seen an explanation of this fame machine that's as kind of cogent and as bleak as what they give us here.
Welcome to the machine. Once it sucks you in, you'll never leave. Grind you up, spit you out. After all, you're just a piece of meat. Welcome to the machine. Yeah.
But after we've said, that nobody should behave like Mötley Crüe behave, and the lifestyle is not a way that humans should live. I do think we need to go back a little bit and talk about Ozzy, because that was
Oh my god.
I thought the Ozzy chapter was great because it was we'd already heard about the house. We'd heard about the their various hijinks and sometimes extending into sex crimes that would take place, and then they meet a person, Ozzy Osbourne, who is even more kind of depraved than they are. I love that they're opening for him on the Bark at the Moon tour. So like you just picture that album. And this is where Ozzy is at this point. So it says, we weren't that excited when Elektra Records told us they got into the opening slot on Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon tour. We'd played a few dates with Kiss after Too Fast for Love, and not only were they excruciatingly boring, but Gene Simmons had kicked us off the tour for bad behavior. I did like.
I love that they said that Kiss was boring, because that's what we've been trying to say for years.
Exactly, I know. And then this is Nicky writing. He says, imagine my surprise 17 years later when ace businessman Gene Simmons called us as I wrote this very chapter, asking not only for the film rights to The Dirt, but also for exclusive film rights to the story of Mötley Crüe for all eternity.
Jesus.
Anyway, he goes on to say, Ozzy was a trembling, twitching mass of nerves and crazy, incomprehensible energy who told us that when he was in Black Sabbath, he took acid every day for an entire year to see what would happen. There was nothing Ozzy hadn't done, and as a result, there was nothing Ozzy could remember having done. So they're in Florida. Ozzy, it says, pulled off his pants and stuck $1 bill in his ass crack, then walked into the bar, offering the $1 to each couple inside. When an elderly lady began to cuss him out, Ozzy grabbed her bag and took off running. He came back to the pool wearing nothing but a little day dress he had found in the bag. We were cracking up, though we weren't sure whether his antics were evidence of a wicked sense of humor or a severe case of schizophrenia.
Probably the latter. Like that was really what stood out to me the most. Like, I'm sure they all have serious mental issues,
right?
But like Ozzy especially, everything that I've heard about him, I think he has like some serious untreated mental issues that
Yeah, well, they talk about Sharon showing up, and the attitude is kind of like, oh, well, now we don't get to have any fun anymore. I came out of that feeling like Sharon deserves a fucking medal because later in that same chapter, when is it that Ozzy licks the pee off of the ground?
I think it's the same chapter. I think all the Ozzy stuff is contained.
Yeah. Okay, so he snorts ants. I got to that part.
And then he pees on the ground, and then he licks it.
Yeah, that's right. And then he allegedly also licks Nicky's pee off the ground.
Oh,
I feel like at that point I was like, okay, I need to read Ozzy's book now. Like,
yep, that's if not next, then definitely on the...
We got to do it at some point. So that was one of my favorites in terms of the, like, you know, rock and roll hijinks. And then I feel like we can kind of skip ahead a little bit. I mean, there is good stuff. They tour with Iron Maiden. Bruce Dickinson allegedly challenged Mick to a sword fight because
oh yeah,
because he thought Mick had like been messing around with his girlfriend, which just seems like so perfect that Bruce Dickinson is like a fucking fencer.
Right.
We kind of talked about there's a point at which all of the band members go off the rails at the same time. It's like their periods are synchronized or something. So Vince gets in the car accident that we touched upon. That same night, Mick like half-heartedly tries to commit suicide by walking into the water on the beach, and he ends up just like passed out on the beach. And he thinks he's dead, and tries to walk through the glass door.
Oh yeah.
Like I know that we've mentioned before that they're idiots, but I really need to drive home that every member of this band is a fucking moron. Like. I don't. Nicky's on. Is Nicky on hair? Is this his first? Around this time is his first overdose, right? Where he gets thrown in the dumpster.
Yep.
So
I think that was right before that, right? When they were still on tour, and then they came back, and Vince committed vehicular manslaughter, right. And Mick attempted suicide. Yeah. I think that was the timeline. Yeah. What was Tommy doing?
Tommy, I think, is reasonably stable during this period.
He's actually reasonably stable for the whole thing, except for he does like punch the fuck out of a woman in the face earlier in the book, and then later is put in jail for domestic abuse.
Right. Yeah, he's got a little problem with his temper, but other than that, you know, compared to the other guys, he's pretty even keeled for most of the book.
Right.
I think Tommy either at this point or soon after, I think, is when he started dating Heather Locklear.
Right. Okay.
So most of the band is like fucking falling apart. Like this is right before Theater of Pain, basically. And they kind of have to straggle through the next album. You know, Vince has to go to like court-ordered rehab. They managed to get him out of jail so he can go on tour. And then they sort of like crash and burn again right before Dr. Feelgood, and that's when Nicky has the more famous overdose that where he actually dies and is brought back and writes "Kickstart My Heart," which I've always loved. Just that, like, that's the song you have a near-death experience, and that's the song you write, which is like, it's a kick-ass song. But it's also like, you would think it would be a little more about grappling with mortality, and it's more like, this fucking rules. Like, I was dead, and it brought me back to life.
I noticed that like, Nicky is so fucking pretentious. Like, there are a couple instances where he talks about like something serious that happened, and then he's like, yeah, and then I wrote something off Theater of Pain. I don't know, just like some stupid fucking song. This is especially like when they were writing Generation Swine.
Oh my god.
I haven't listened to that album yet. I don't really need to, but there are several instances where like on stage he like was showing pictures of his dad and shit like that, and
right. Yeah, exactly. And it just sounds like, the most miserable. I mean, it's like, I'm sure it was all very personally, you know, he just found out. So we kind of glossed over their childhoods. But, you know, Nicky Sixx grew up without his father. He later kind of tracked him down when he was 19 And his dad was like, I don't have a son. And that's when he legally changed his name to Nicky Six, because that wasn't, in case it wasn't clear, that wasn't his birth name.
He also stole someone's name.
Yeah, it was somebody else's. Yeah, that's right. But so anyway, he finally, he looks up his dad again and finds out that he died in the late 80s. And this is like late 90s. And he decides to do this like incredibly over the top, like, let me see if I can find the passage. Oh, here it is. I decided to exercise my feelings for my father once and for all on stage. I composed a bass piece with Chris Vrenna of Nine Inch Nails in which I soloed over all these different textures and soundscapes while a series of slides flashed in the background. The images were of an embryo, a child being born, a cute baby photo of myself, and a picture of me when I was a happy little kid in a Halloween mask. Then the music darkened. And a series of words flashed across two 40-inch wide screens. Abandonment, vacant, heroin, destruction. Then the music stopped and a big question mark appeared, as if to say, why me, or what next? To close the piece, I played dark ambient noise and short minor key melodies on the bass as the film Donna and I had made at my father's graveside played in the background. The first night I performed the solo, my eyes brimmed with tears. He says afterward fans backstage said they'd cried too because they had abandoned by their fathers. I mean, maybe it was very moving. I'm just imagining going to a Mötley Crüe show and like wanting to hear girls, girls, girls and getting like a fucking bass solo about
Right. That's another thing I was going to say too, is that soloing, this is a bass solo. Nobody likes bass solos, especially not Nicky Six's bass solos. So you're just sitting there listening to, like, that's when you go and get another drink at the bar.
Yeah. And apparently at the same show, he said Tommy had found some bootleg footage of people committing suicide and getting burned to death.
Oh, Jesus.
It was gruesome stuff, and the idea was to screen these atrocities during our anti-suicide song, Flush, to show the audience that no matter how miserable they were, they still had it pretty good. But when I looked out at the audience during the song, they all looked terrified. I remember too late that kids don't go to a Mötley Crüe concert to think about their own mortality. They go to a Mötley Crüe concert to hopefully get a blowjob in the backseat of a car. So, I mean, no, that didn't happen to anybody that night, I guess. But
right.
Yeah, it is their whole like edgy alternative period. I mean, can you imagine? Like, the crazy thing is Vince Neil sang on that album, but I'm just like trying to square Vince Neil with with songs like that and with like that kind of vibe. Like
one thing I noticed, this may be a good place to insert this just because I just mentioned Nicky Six's musicianship, but from that and watching a documentary about Mötley Crüe, I just noticed that like their entire band just owed itself to women supporting them. Like, despite the fact that they're all like rampant misogynists, and especially Nicky, who like doesn't, by his own like admission, doesn't respect most women.
Yeah, like basically until his current wife.
Right.
And I guess Lita Ford a little bit, like.
Well, yeah, or even like he hates Pamela Anderson so much and keeps referring to her as Yoko, which I mean is inaccurate anyway because Yoko Ono did not fucking break up the Beatles. Right. But not only that, but like the reason that the band was able to like support themselves in the early years is because they were all dating like wealthy models,
right?
And like a woman basically taught Nicky Six how to play a fucking bass. It's just like astounding to me, and I wish women would stop taking care of these fucking stupid men, because then we wouldn't have Mötley Crüe. We'd have some other dope band.
They'd have never gotten out of that fucking house, like if it hadn't.
Right.
maybe the thing to talk about now is Vanity, because that's kind of like kind of related. I mean, Vanity didn't, Vanity was a mess at this point, so she didn't really help the band. She was more just kind of like part of the general like wallpaper at that period. But it is interesting to see her show up and to see, we're kind of like, I feel like I always have a foot in the like Prince world, because I do a blog about Prince that's, more serious than what we do here. And then I have a foot in the like dirtbag rock world at all times.
Right, so this was like the worlds collided.
Exactly. So it was
so many worlds collided in this book, though. Like they knew everybody.
Oh yeah, I know. Like I said, Gary
if you
and
if you were
Grammer.
a fucking Kelsey, if you're a Frasier fan and a Mötley Crüe fan,
I mean,
this is the book for you.
Who isn't? But
Vanity is the one who puts him on crack, right?
Yeah, I think so. So she did help him in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, she introduced him to crack.
He has a personal assistant named Jesse James. This guy sounds like a character. He says, who was in a 6'5" version of Keith Richards, and who always wore an SS hat covering up what I believe was a hairpiece. He went out and fetched me drugs, and as a reward, he got to do them with me. We drank and shot up coke mostly, but every now and then I'd inject a little heroin for old time's sake. I think this is the first time that he's trying to clean up. So basically, they watched the video for "Nasty Girl" by Vanity 6, and Nikki says it would kind of be cool to fuck her, and then so Jesse's like, "Go for it, cowboy," and so Nikki calls his management office and tells them to set up a meeting with Vanity. They call her managers, and then he meets her, and the whole like the whole story is basically that she's even crazier than him. It says, the second she opened the door, she fixed me with a crazy stare. Her eyes seemed like they were about to whirl out of her skull, and I knew before she even spoke a word that she was completely psychotic. But then again, so was I. She invited me into her apartment, which was only a few rooms cluttered with trash and clothes and artwork. Her house was full of weird poster boards with magazine clippings, egg cartons, and dead leaves glued to them. She called these things her artwork, and each one had a story. This one I called the Redeemer, she said, pointing out one messy collage. It depicts the prophecy of the angel descending on the city, for he will come to redeem the souls trapped in the bulbs of street lamps. And the little piggies will walk down the street, and the children will laugh.
Pause, because I would like to actually see that artwork.
Yeah.
Because I wonder if it's actually good, and Nikki Sixx is just a fucking idiot.
Right. I mean, he could. I mean,
they would probably look like outsider art, but outsider art can be pretty dope. So
right.
I would actually I wish that there were pictures of Vanity's cracked out collages, because they're probably awesome.
Yeah, and that I think you had you said something that I think was kind of astute about Vanity, because she's I've written about her on the website before. She's somebody that I find to be a very kind of tragic figure in pop music. I think, not as talented, obviously, but sort of like Amy Winehouse, where it's like you can just see how everybody in her life kind of let her down, and that kind of ended tragically. But you said something that I think was kind of interesting about Vanity, and about how, basically everything about her persona was defined by a man, everything we ever saw.
Or it wasn't even that. It was, that a little bit, but also not really her persona, but every story we hear about her is, except for, I haven't read her book yet, but everything like her, I guess it is like her public image, but not necessarily like the persona she wanted to convey, but like what we know of her really, and her persona is filtered through men's stories.
Right.
So not even necessarily the persona from her point of view and what she wanted to do, but like how we view her persona is all like from Prince and Princess Camp and Nikki Sixx, and that she like, because Nikki found her to be like, even though they were dating, quote unquote, they were mainly just smoking crack together.
Right.
And like everything
I don't
he
even
says
think
about
they had
her,
sex very much. I think they were literally just on crack.
Right.
Which we know from Rick James's book is not conducive to, really, it doesn't bring out the best in people.
Right. But every story that Nikki tells about her, it's that she's like a nuisance and really annoying and like stupid and below him. And I just wonder, like, obviously, but he was a fucking crackhead junkie too.
Right.
So it's interesting to me that, like, from his point of view, she's seen as a nuisance when they were both equally drugged out.
Right. Yeah. And he was, I'm positive that he was a nuisance to the people around him. I mean, after he was resuscitated and wrote "Kickstart My Heart," he literally goes back to his house, changes his answering machine so it says, "Hi, this is Nikki. I'm not here because I'm dead," and then ODs again. like it's literally like as soon as he gets home. Which, I mean, that's like...
Which also he broke out of the hospital and just left. So he wasn't even supposed to be home yet. And one more thing about Vanity before we move on, but it's interesting to me, like, I've noticed this especially with stories about Vanity, that, like, people act a certain way about women when they react to how shitty they're being treated. Mm-hmm. So, like, when women react to being, like, gaslit and fucking abandoned and like treated like shit by men, and they react to it in a certain way, it's like, oh, she's crazy.
Right.
And I just wonder, like, obviously she was on drugs, but I wonder how much of that is just like how men are telling the story, not what actually fucking happened.
Right. Because I mean, this is a band that they've never met a woman who they don't give a derogatory nickname to within 5 minutes of meeting her. So
right.
I don't know. Is there anything so far that we've I know that we kind of glossed over a lot of it, but like I said, it's so much of this book is kind of just a blur. You know, it's just like from one overdose to the next, or from one vehicular manslaughter to the next.
I mean, there is page 62 includes both. This is one of Vince's chapters, by the way. It includes both the anecdote about them.
Oh my god, yeah, this is a classic, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and this is well known, so there's not much to say about it, but basically they would
we might have even talked, did we talk about this on the podcast before? I feel like we might have.
I mean, I think everybody talks about it.
We've definitely talked about it. Like, I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, but we've definitely talked about it.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, I mean, everybody knows it. They put burritos on their dicks instead of taking a bath, I guess. Because I guess specifically a burrito will mask the smell of a vagina on your dick. Unlike soap.
I just love, like, okay, so I can kind of understand it, because from what I gleaned from this, they did not bathe very frequently. So I can see how, like, their girlfriends, if they came home, freshly showered, they would be like suspicious. Like, I can understand that.
That's true, I guess.
But what I want to know is, why is their dick smelling like burritos not why is that not suspect in any way? Like, what were you doing?
It's an egg, so it's like a breakfast burrito. So what they would do, it says we'd scrounge up enough money to buy an egg burrito from Noggles. Then we'd bite the end off and stick our dicks into the warm meat to cover up the smell of pussy, so that our girlfriends didn't know we were fucking anything stupid or drunk enough to get into Tommy's van. So they were just putting breakfast burritos on their dicks. Also in the same chapter, they are biting each other.
Oh, yeah.
So they would just bite each other's nipples.
Yeah.
Oh no, Mick would bite Tommy's nipple. It says, wait, this whole paragraph is actually pretty amazing. I didn't know what to think of Mick. He was crazy. He'd sit across the club from me scribbling on a piece of paper. Then he'd bring it over and it would say something like, "I'm going to kill you." His face was all scruffy and unshaven, and he used to bite Tommy's nipple all the time. All Tommy would do was weakly swat him away and say, "Cut it out, that chafes." I don't know how true that is, just because this is Vince.
Right.
And a couple of the things he says, I don't think are true.
Yeah.
But they're entertaining nonetheless.
Right. Well, one of the parts where, you know, the two stories disagree with each other is I think it might be Vince that I believe more in this case, but Tommy tells this story about how, like, this is after he leaves the band, because he decides that his heart isn't in Mötley Crüe anymore, and he just needs to be making his, like, rap rock new metal music. So he's on his last tour with them. He says, I was standing at the ticket counter talking with Ashley, who worked for our record company and was taking care of our seats. They're at the Las Vegas airport. When Vince walked up all shitty, drunk, and slurred, "Give me my fucking boarding pass, Ashley. You can kiss Tommy's ass later." Dude, I had no idea where all that fucking hostility came from. I guess I hadn't been happy since he rejoined the band. And sure, he wasn't my favorite dude on the planet, but I never did anything fucking mean to that guy. He just had so much pain bottled up that he didn't share with anyone. And dude, I feel that. But when he said that shit in the airport, it didn't put me in a very sympathetic mood. So then it escalates, and eventually they're saying, you know, fuck you and to each other. And then he says, out of nowhere, Vince fucking clocked me in the jaw. And they end up fighting. Vince tells this story. I was talking to Ashley Smith, the publicist at our record company, when Tommy, being who he is, jumped in the middle of the conversation. He had nothing to do with what we were talking about. When I told him to keep his mouth shut, he grabbed me by the neck. "Take your fucking hands off me right now," I ordered him. And then he punches him. And he says, "I wouldn't say that's a sucker punch. I'd say he's just a sucker who got punched." So actually, I don't know. So I was saying I think I believe Vince more. Reading that again, I think they're two equally stupid sides of the story that I'm not convinced by either of them. Like,
right, yeah.
I still don't understand
that's
how
I
that
thought.
escalated into fisticuffs. Like,
right, I just read the last, like, right before we started recording, and I agree. Like, I don't know or care who's right. It's just fucking stupid. And I think, like, in the next chapter when Nikki's talking about it, feels the same way. He's just like, what the fuck? Yeah. Vince's chapters are just hands down the best. There's the whole part where he's talking about how he wants to he keeps like trying to initiate a fight with Axl Rose.
Yes.
Well, I guess what initially happens is Axl Rose initiated the fight and Vince is trying to end it.
Right. Well, yeah, so what happens? So what happens is Izzy Stradlin is like coming on to Vince's wife, and Vince's wife slaps Izzy, and Izzy karate kicks her in the stomach. And, you know, obviously Vince is upset about this. So he confronts Izzy about it, and then Axl gets involved, and Axl, like, is, you know, I just want to make sure we got the karate kick to the stomach part. Like, that's
right.
So anyway, Axl is like is saying that he wants to fight Vince, and then he apparently, I don't know who to believe on this because I feel like they're both kind of like equally disreputable. But apparently Axl would keep setting times and places to fight and then not showing up, and Vince would show up and Axl would not be there.
I imagined it like an anime scene, like in like Dragon Ball Z, when like one person would show up and like be waiting for someone. Like I just imagine like an aerial view looking down on like chubby Vince Neil, and I guess he wasn't that chubby at that point, but he was just like fist clenched, like waiting. There's like sand blowing across the plane.
Yeah.
That's what I imagined every time I read that. And then what's funny is before I read that chapter, I'd watched that documentary about Headbangers Ball, and there was like this part was covered where Vince Neil and Axl Rose were beefing. I'll find that video and send it to you so we can put it in the show notes or whatever.
Yeah. It is because this is such an interesting snapshot of a moment. It is so weird. Like, it's so weird that just in the early to mid 80s, like, everybody decided to listen to, you know, vapid party rock. Like, and they even describe, you know, early in the book, this first the US festival in 1983, which they kind of talk about as like, this is when new wave was over, and now, you know, rock came back. And it's just like, it's so funny to me that just a generation of teenagers decided that this is the music we want to listen to. Like Mötley Crüe, Poison, Rat, fucking Winger. Like
it's what I listened to when I was a teenager.
And yeah, it's like, there's something, I don't know if it's just because of like who was in charge at MTV and VH1, or if there is, something kind of resonant about it, because yeah, especially when you were a teenager, but even like toward the tail end of my teenage years, like I was saying at the beginning, The Dirt was on bookshelves, Rock of Love was on VH1. Like there's this weird glam metal resurgence.
Yeah.
And that was around, I think the original lineup of Mötley Crüe reunited around that time. Again.
Right. And when I was a teenager, VH1 Classic got on, or I don't know if it had, we got VH1 Classic. I don't know if it was new at this point. I think it was though. And it was basically like, when VH1 Classic first came out, it was basically just like all metal all the time.
Yeah.
Like they showed, they might have shown Headbangers Ball on there again. I think they showed reruns of Headbangers Ball. They had like a metal hour, like late at night. They had documentaries. They had that fucking stupid Eddie Trunk show, that metal show.
Yeah.
Like it was just constant metal programming. And I would watch that shit all the time because that was the stuff I was into at the time too. So it was like, for some reason, like VH1 and MTV especially are like very invested in hair metal programming.
And I kind of miss it. Like I kind of miss this weird, like, if you think about just how critically reviled. I mean, even like Mötley Crüe at least have some kind of, I think, grudging appreciation from critics. But that whole like Sunset Strip, other than Guns N' Roses, that whole scene did not age well in terms of critical reactions and the canon and all that stuff. Like nobody is really checking for Great White, but anyway, I there's something about like that era that I miss, like that, Ricky Rackman was still a television personality, that's just so weird. How did he have like a 20-year afterlife? I
know, he literally had a club that was a cat house, and then they just put him on that documentary about Headbangers Ball is actually really good. I learned so much from it. Because they had another host, and then somehow like I think like someone knew Ricky Rockman and they put him on there. And now it's crazy because like 10 years ago, he was the fucking co-host of Daisy of Love.
Right.
And he was basically, like, Daisy's, like, relationship counselor on there that she didn't fucking listen to at all.
Yeah.
Like, all of these guys had reality TV shows. I was just watching that shitty Tommy Lee Goes to College that is, like, insanely scripted, and it's just him, like, taking classes at USC.
I know that you've said it's stupid, but I still kind of want to see it.
Oh, you should definitely watch it. I just had it on in the background, but God, it was stupid.
Yeah. And
Tommy Lee is like, he's such a fucking idiot.
Yeah, he's like a ditz. He's like a male ditz. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff toward the
Dutz.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff toward the end that I feel like, I mean, it's definitely a gripping read all the way through, but, I'm just like we said earlier, not super interested in their post Vince period, not super interested in Tommy's relationship with Pam, although there are some great excerpts from his prison diary.
Oh Jesus, that was hard for me to read. They're like he's like a teenager scribbling.
Yeah, first of all, he was in prison for, I mean, like, to be fair, I've never been in prison. I hope to never be in prison. I'm sure it's just like, I'm sure even a day is a you know, miserable and potentially life-changing experience. But I mean, there are people who spend their entire lives in prison. Tommy Lee was in prison for 6 months, and the way he writes about it, it's like he's, you know, like marking the the tally marks on the wall.
Right. Well, I read Angela Davis's autobiography.
Right. Yeah.
Most of that biography, she is in prison.
Yeah.
And related to that comment, I think my favorite part of Tommy Lee's stint in prison is when towards the end of his sentence, he sees a dead body, like a corpse being hauled out of the jail, and then he later finds out that a black inmate was beaten to death by the prison guards.
Right.
And that he's been hearing like frequent beatings, and a black inmate died. And instead of going to prison reform, his brain goes, wait, all these beatings? I'm a rock star. What am I doing in here?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't belong here, bro. Like...
Yeah, I know. Like, not, maybe I should use my platform to reform prisons.
Yeah, imagine...
I got to get out here and fuck Pamela Anderson again.
Right, exactly. Imagine how dope those Methods of Mayhem records would have been if he turned it into a politically conscious.
Right. I also love, speaking of politically conscious Crüe albums, that fucking... Oh, and they were talking about Generation Swine and how it was supposed to be politically conscious. I just wanted to stick something in my eyeballs.
Yeah,
like,
this is a band that I actively don't. The less I know about their politics, the better. Like I don't want to know.
Right. Well, we were talking about because Vince. At first, I was thinking it was Mötley Crüe, but then I later read into it, and it was Vince Neil solo. He was supposed to play the inauguration, the 2016 inauguration, and he got disinvited. Okay, so first of all,
I want to know who invited him. Like that's
he was apparently invited.
Was
to
it
the
like Nancy Pelosi? Like who?
Right. And but that's another thing is that I love that he was disinvited by the Trump administration. But I love that. So basically, the terms of the agreement were as long as Hillary Clinton wins, Vince Neil solo is playing the inauguration. I love that. And also, I love that he, we said something really funny about this because we were talking about it in, via DM.
Right.
But I don't think he cares about, like, I feel like Vince Neil is apolitical.
Right.
Although I did later read something about how he was at one of the debates, which is also hilarious to me. Vince Neil, like, sitting there during a debate.
I hope they kept cutting to him.
Yeah, they did. Apparently they like cut to him and it wasn't like right to him, but they like panned through the audience and people recognized him. But I just feel like he doesn't give a fuck about political parties. He just heard party.
It's just parties. Yeah, exactly.
Inauguration party, all right.
touched on the epic Vince Neil chapter.
Oh my god. Chapter 9, part 9.
Yeah.
If you don't read anything else in this book, chapter 9, part 9 is the part you need to read. That is the greatest chapter of any book ever printed.
So you were like kind of you were telling me about this almost live.
I don't even know if I want to read anything from the chapter. I think I should just read what I wrote to you. So yeah,
that's a good idea.
I can't fucking believe what I was reading. So within this chapter, Vince goes to Hawaii with a stripper named Savannah. Okay. He has to go into treatment because he fell off the wagon for the millionth time because he's drinking. By the time he gets out of rehab, he says that the stripper that he went to Hawaii with. So basically, he went to Hawaii. I think he came back and he went into rehab. And by the time he gets out of rehab in LA, the stripper Savannah is dating Pauly Shore. Which, okay, sidebar.
That's far. That's enough. Yeah.
Well, now would probably be a good time to talk about the video to You're Invited But Your Friend Can't Come, which has Pauly Shore in it.
It has Pauly Shore not like being blocked from entering a Vince Neil concert, which makes me think that that's a reference to their like real life beef over this stripper.
Yeah. So next thing I said was, wow, I spoke too soon because the worst thing that happened to this woman is not dating Pauly Shore. The next paragraph, she dies by suicide because she had gotten into a car crash, I guess, that had disfigured herself.
Oh my God,
so she shot herself with a Beretta. Okay. And Vince Neil just kind of cavalier, like, mentions that real cavalier. Next paragraph begins with Vince Neil moving in with Rob Lowe. And then it's like 6 months of debauchery with Rob Lowe and Vince Neil. This paragraph is really good. Okay, so after 6 months, Rob's bachelor life ended when his former girlfriend moved back into the house. By then I had found a manager, blah, blah, blah. So basically, that was when he wrote the song for Encino Man, which is You're Invited But Your Friend Can't Come.
With Tommy Shaw and Jack Blades from Damn Yankees. So
Yep. I love this comment. That pretty much blew Nikki and Tommy's theory that I didn't care about music anymore because they hadn't even released a thing yet. So I love that the song that he wrote for Encino Man is what is going to convince Nikki and Tommy that he still cares about music.
It is a great song, and
honestly, it's better than anything Mötley Crüe came out with at that point.
I love Encino Man, and I definitely owned that soundtrack on audio cassette in the 90s. But I
kept that insult in mind when I sued them for 25% of their future profits and $5 million in damages. It was the gentlemanly thing to do, my lawyer said. And then this is just like a weird like sidebar, but my attorney also closed a $4 million deal for me at Warner Brothers where Mo Austin said, you know what we should do? We should take Vince and that other rock kid we've got, David Lee Roth, and put them in a band together.
I wish that had happened.
And this doesn't happen because they're both singers, but can you fucking imagine?
I know.
That would be amazing. Just two blonde singers?
Yeah.
Two fucking idiots singing together?
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Especially like 1990 or whenever the hell this was.
Right. Yeah. I think they should have done it. Yeah. What was
I mean,
Dave doing?
Time. They're both alive.
Yeah. That's true. They're both alive and they look like two different kinds of trolls, you know, like
I actually drew a drawing of them where they look like Jeff. Not Vince Neil, but Sammy Hagar.
So same difference. I feel like Vince and Sammy kind of look alike now. So
yeah, a little bit. And then like the next chapter, he's talking about what the fuck? They're watching some movie. Oh, I remember what it was. So he's hanging out with Shannon Doherty now, and she, I guess, is gonna play Margaret Mitchell in like a movie about Gone with the Wind or something like that. So they're watching Gone with the Wind, and he's like, the whole time all I was thinking about was putting my dick up Shannon Doherty's ass while he's watching Gone with the Wind. I hope it was like the scene where soldiers are getting their limbs amputated. Oh, and then I think, this is the same chapter where he's talking about how he has a sex tape, conveniently, which came out around the same time that Tommy Lee's sex tape did, which I looked it up afterward, and basically, like, it was on a list of the 5 worst sex tapes, although it was rated higher than
Gene Simmons.
Gene Simmons was was closer to 1 than Vince Neil's, but it still made it in the top 5. And the review was that it was very stage looking, which makes me think that it wasn't a coincidence that it came out at the same time.
That's hilarious, especially because Vince and Tommy were like, they hated each other at that specific time. Like I feel like they specifically were feuding.
Right. He also allegedly fucked Pamela, which now I don't know if I believe that or not, just because I just feel like from reading Vince's chapters that he makes shit up and causes trouble.
Right.
Which makes it
a great it's super entertaining. Yeah.
Right. This part was good too, where it's like this is all the same chapter, by the way. It's just like a whole fucking it's like a play in one chapter. So he opens a bar. This whole chapter is basically about his midlife crisis. He's 30.
Right. Yeah.
So,
which I guess
I'm almost 30. I'm 3 years from 30. So I hope that this is what my 30th year on this planet is like, because this is fucking sweet. So he opens his own bar, and he decides to do this event that's sponsored by Jägermeister. And so he had never had Jägermeister, so he didn't realize how drunk he was going to get off of it. And he says, I don't remember much of what happened later that night. I somehow walked outside, climbed on my Harley, and rode down the pavement into the door of the club. The place was completely packed, and as I revved up the bike and cruised onto the dance floor, the wheels slipped out from under me, and the bike hit the floor and slid into a row of tables. I landed on my back on the dance floor and passed out. So... And at this point, he was getting kind of chubby too. That just makes everything funnier. It's like ham Vince Neil,
wiping out in a Harley indoors.
Yeah.
I love that of all people. How did he manage to almost commit vehicular homicide a second time?
Right. It says that he wakes up and he's glad that he didn't kill anyone. It's you rode a fucking motorcycle indoors onto a dance floor and wiped out.
And also randomly in this chapter, he does an album with the Dust Brothers, which I definitely need to hear that. I'm sure it was terrible, but is that all of that's all of the craziness, right? I mean,
the next chapter is literally his daughter dying horrifically, so
right,
which is horrible. That was the one part of the book that I actually felt incredibly sad.
Yeah, you genuinely feel for him, because this is something that was not. It had nothing to do with him, and in fact, it's kind of interesting. He said that basically the area they were living in, they were dumping toxic waste, and there was unusually high rates of cancer in that area. So
because this was his 4-year-old daughter who died of really horrible case of cancer.
Really aggressive. Yeah.
Another thing I just wanted to mention real quick, another David Lee Roth reference is on page 104. Let me see if I can find that. They mentioned Krell again. Because remember in the David Lee Roth book, there were the Krell Wars, and we were like, what the fuck does that mean?
And Dave made it sound like he invented that, basically.
Right.
And now I feel like that's not true.
Right. Well, I mean...
Or maybe it caught on. I don't know.
Right. This was the Ozzy chapter. I think it was Ozzy who was saying Krell.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because he sings a song, right? I'm the Krell man, something.
I'm trying. There's so much shit that happened that I honestly can't remember. Let me see. Oh yeah, here it is. Ozzy Harleyman and I and the Turtles. He was always singing on ours, or he was always on ours. He'd burst through the door with a baggie full of coke, singing, "I'm the Crowley man, doing all the Crow that I can." And we'd snort up the Crow all night long. I don't know, like that. I don't know who did it first, but I mean, Ozzy has a song for it, so
right. Yeah, I feel like we've caught all of the like notable cameos. The one, well, I mean, Aerosmith show up a lot because they're trying to get Nikki to stop doing drugs.
yeah, I love that. Steven Tyler always shows up in rehab with people. And, like that's where he showed up in Peter Chris's, right?
Right,
Right,
and was it Didn't he do? Wasn't he in rehab with Rick James at one point? Like, didn't they first? Yeah. They did coke together the first time they met, and then they met again when they were both in rehab.
Yeah, that's what happened. I think
there was a good. There was one more good Kiss reference. It's when Tommy was talking about when he would fly on his drum set over the audience, and then he would jump off and like bungee jump over the audience.
Oh,
and one time he hit his head. But he said he said it was Norman's job to pull the handbrake at the last minute so that I'd screech to a halt like 5 feet over the heads of the crowd and then just bounce there on this elastic rope. I liked it to look insane. None of this fucking Gene Simmons fly me over the fucking audience like Peter Pan shit. Which, if you've ever watched a Latter-day Kiss show,
or an early-day Kiss show,
that is absolutely he's just dangling like it's like the least graceful thing,
right? Yeah, he literally just looks like an action figure that you put on like a shoestring and are just like swinging it.
But I mean, on the other hand, to my knowledge, Gene Simmons has never cracked his skull on the on the venue floor. So.
Did we cover everything?
Yeah,
that was all my notes.
Yeah, like we didn't, we obviously didn't tell the whole story. You got to read the book for that. But
one more thing that I forgot about. So one of my favorite passages was just like basically apropos of nothing. They mentioned that they had a private plane with a dick and balls painted on it. And they said, so every time they landed it, it looked like they were coming to fuck the city.
Yeah.
I recently found out about this thing you can apply to as a woman artist, where you get to paint. I think it's a United plane, and I thought about that. Like I should, because that would be like related to my art.
Right.
I should apply to that and see if I can recreate the Mötley Crüe private jet with a United plane. You can, every time you take a United flight, you can look like you're coming to fuck the city.
Yeah. So I feel like we've
there's just so much. Like,
yeah, like this would be,
we could go on for hours.
This would be a 5-hour long podcast if we were actually going to go through chronologically. And I do think this is a book that you should read as a kind of like masterpiece of the genre. You know, like this is like whether you really are a huge Crüe fan or not, this and probably Hammer of the Gods, the Led Zeppelin book, are the gold
there's
standard.
There's not really too much shit in this one, but there's definitely shitting in shoes in Hammer of the Gods.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm glad that we tackled this one, and it's given me a new appreciation, and sometimes a new level of revulsion for Mötley Crüe. Just depends on what chapter. I think real quickly, we should talk a little bit about the movie.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I'm looking forward to it because I love rock bios. Like, whether they're good or bad, it's gonna be amazing.
Yes, and I just think like the cast, when I just reading the cast made me laugh. Machine Gun Kelly as Tommy Lee is going to be hilarious, and I mean, I was thinking back to when I saw him on Catfish, and I can see some Tommy in that performance, like especially when he's like getting really upset, and he's like, dude, like basically anytime he says dude, like that really channels Tommy. Ewan Rian is Mick Mars. I don't know about that. He's definitely creepy looking, so they got that at least. I don't know if is he old enough to be Mick Mars? I don't know, but
Mick Mars wasn't that much older than them. I think he was like almost 30.
Yeah.
Oh,
my
David
God.
Lee Roth is
David Lee Roth.
Fuck
yes. And Ozzy. Okay. Yeah, this will be.
Yeah, I'm really excited to watch this.
So yeah, this podcast is going to be going up on the same day as The Dirt. I am curious to see like how No Holds Barred the movie is, or if they're going to kind of tone it down a little bit.
Right. I kind of, at least from the trailer, I got the idea that it was going to be like they're still the heroes. Like, it's this band that came off of like Incredible Odds and made this great music, and that's really not the case if you ask me. Right. They went from being poor assholes to rich assholes.
Right. And one thing that I like about this book is, we talked a little bit about how maybe there's not a lot of, genuine remorse or self-reflection, but I do appreciate how they're willing to make themselves look like assholes. Like, and I don't know if that's because they're oblivious, or if it's just because they're, that kind of willing to open themselves up, and it's you definitely get the sense, like, especially with somebody like Nikki Sixx, that it's kind of cathartic, and
right.
that he's sort of this is very much like a product of therapy, and with Tommy too. Like these guys all spent, other than Mick Mars, who talks about how therapy is for piss babies.
Yeah.
And I feel like Vince Neil is more of a fan of just like self-medicating, but
I feel like Vince Neil, like a lot of Vince Neil's chapters are just him like telling tall tales and just talking shit, which is why they're the best chapters. There's absolutely no self-reflection except for the I feel like he handled the one about his daughter's death really well. Right. The rest of those chapters were just golden. Like, golden, just like bullshit.
It's mostly also, when we were reading this, you described it as like a textbook of toxic masculinity.
Yeah,
and that definitely like nobody knows how to deal with their emotions. Nobody nobody talks to each. It takes them. Nikki Sixx and Vince Neil don't have like a serious heart-to-heart until like 1994. Like, that's so
right.
13 years after the band starts, then they finally actually sit down and talk to each other.
Right.
That just kind of says it all. Yeah, like Tommy can't control his rages until he gets thrown into jail.
And even then, like his self-reflection, even in that, is like limited.
Yeah, right. Right. So I definitely don't think Mötley Crüe are heroes, but they definitely there is something kind of admirable in the way that they just kind of like let it all out. There's no they're not trying to make themselves look like saints. This is not, Paul Stanley's autobiography.
Right.
It's like if Four Aces wrote theirs. Basically.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. It's like it reminded me most of Ace because he was pretty much as far as I could tell, like realistic about his experiences.
Right. Yeah. So we one down. I don't know what we're gonna do next. I don't know if I don't think I'm even gonna venture a guess. But I do think we'll probably do another one pretty soon. Because these are the most fun, I think. Of all of the podcast subjects we do.
Yeah, I mean we have a lot of books to read. I have a backlog of stuff. I still have Sebastian Bach's book, which I got signed by him. That needs to be read. I also just discovered Sebastian Bach's YouTube channel, which is pretty fucking amazing. If you ever wanted to watch like dumb, poorly shot dad videos starring Sebastian Bach, just look up Sebastian Bach on YouTube. Shout out to him. And then I have Steven Tyler's book, which is we definitely need to read because, like you said, he shows up in everyone's book.
I want to know if everybody shows up in his book. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The most notable, of course, is in Peter Griss's book when he just pops his head in and says "Tyler here" whenever someone else is being interviewed. we also have Stairway to Heaven that I read years ago, but we probably need to read again because that has some gold in it.
So there's a lot to look forward to. Thank you for your patience, those of you who are waiting for us, and thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you again soon. Once again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast on Mötley Crüe's The Dirt. If you haven't had enough, and if you're listening to this on the first day that the podcast goes up, check out our Twitter feed at Dystopian Tweets. We will be watching the Netflix movie, and Callie and I will both be live tweeting it. So if you haven't had enough of our comments on Mötley Crüe, we will have more of those during the movie. If you don't have a Twitter, don't worry, we will be back with another podcast, specifically a shorter one, specifically talking about our reactions to the movie. So we're back, and hopefully we're going to keep it going. If you want to follow us, you can find us on Dystopian Dance Party on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at Dystopian Tweets, on Instagram, Dystopian Gram. Of course, you can always find us at dystopiandanceparty.com. And you can find the podcast on wherever you find podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher. I think we're still on Google Play. So you can find us in a lot of places, so you don't have any excuse. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon. More sex, more tats, more blood, more pain.
making big tips, showing up the nice big tits. Ha!
I don't think we introduced ourselves. Fuck years.